Hermetic magicians are a funny bunch. We like to add complexity to things that really doesn't need complexity. And a prime example of this is actually the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which is a very complicated subject in and of itself. And today I want to make it a little bit simpler for everyone and kind of explain my position on certain Kabbalistic things. And today we're going to do that by going up the tree through subtraction. I am Dave the Amateur Magus. On this channel I talk all about the mechanics behind ceremonial magic, occultism, esotericism, and the mechanics behind everything you can find within a dusty old grimoire. If you enjoy what I do here and you want to support the channel, link in the description of the Patreon. We're getting exclusive access to videos early, Patreon exclusive content, including the Occultic Manual series, which I aim at being more instructional than what I have here on the channel, but less unapproachable than some of the old grimoires I like to reference on the channel from time to time. If any of that sounds of interest to you, link in the description. Hope to see you all there. And if you're already over on the Patreon, you have my thanks for your continued and ongoing support. The Kabbalistic Tree of Life is an interesting beast to cover, because when you look at the tree, you think, oh, so the things at the top should be more complex than the things at the bottom. And that's kind of true, but the problem is that the reason why it's more complex is actually, paradoxically, because it's more simple. You know, we can't understand the concept of raw projection without making an analogy to something else. Even in the Kabbalistic system, raw projection and raw reception are married to each other in the form of Chokmah and Binah. So, as it were, we're going to go ahead and we're going to climb through the different spheres in the Tree of Life by subtraction. And we're going to start with Malkuth, the physical world. Now, I'm going to make an obvious and important clarification right off the bat. This is Hermetic. This is not the Jewish Tree of Life. The Jewish Tree of Life has some major differences that I'm not getting into. So this is the Hermetic Tree of Life climbed through subtraction. We begin with the sphere of Malkuth. Malkuth is the physical world. It is the world that you occupy with your physical body day in and day out. It is the material plane in its entirety, and hopefully I shouldn't need to explain what that is to you. If I do, something has gone very wrong. Now, I said we were climbing the tree through subtraction, so what are we subtracting first? The physical element of the material plane. We're straight up getting rid of the physical aspect of Malkuth. What does this leave us? Well, this leaves us with the ability to do anything we think of, right? Without the interference of the physical. And as such, this gives us the astral plane, the realm of ideas, dreams, and pure thoughts. This is the first aspect of where thoughts go and how thoughts operate. It is also the realm where symbolism operates. And this is where we are going to continue our separation. We'll get to that in a bit. The astral plane and Yesod are the foundational fundamentals for the rest of the tree. They are the gateway, the kind of filter and valve system that allows the ideas of Malkuth to go into the rest of the tree. Without going through Yesod, you can't really get the full extent of any magical influence. You could get influence from Hod and Netzach, but you're not going to get them nearly as powerfully as if they manifest through Yesod. Now, going from Yesod to Hod, we need to subtract something again. And so what are we going to subtract? Well, we're going to subtract symbolism entirely. What does this give us? Well, this leaves us with raw information. It leaves us with language, as we would understand it, and ideas and thoughts that have been differentiated, right? The words good and bad actually have, like, emotional impact here, and we have the ability to use words in the first place. However, those concepts exist, but the symbols for them no longer exist. So we don't have pictorial representations, we don't have words or anything. We just have those raw concepts and those raw ideas, right? And the reason for this is because this is the sphere of Hod, which is the sphere of Mercury. The sphere of Hod is where we have all of the material intelligences, and it is where emotion is separated through the use of language. So we're going to get rid of that separation as we climb from Hod to Netzach. We are going to be removing that ability to separate emotions properly. This leaves us with emotional expression in its rawest form. This leaves us with Netzach, the sphere of Venus. And this is where we need to take a moment and realize that these are all differentiated. The happiness and sadness are both separated out from each other. Good and bad emotions are separated out from each other. There is an ability to differentiate which emotion goes where. Now, this raises the very interesting question of how do we separate something out of Netzach in order to climb to Tiphereth, the sphere of consciousness and unity and synthesizing? We're going to separate the separation of emotions. In fact, we're kind of separating emotions out entirely. And what this does is this leaves us now with the great I am. This is consciousness in its rawest form. This is the synthesis of Geburah and Hesed combining into one. This is balance. This is structure. This is the completed conscious mind before it goes down to disseminate into the emotions, language, symbolism, and then eventually the material plane. This is the divine conscious spark, as it were, the logos. Now, when we get to Tiphereth, this is where we get kind of into very bizarre aspects, because we now have the completed conscious mind, we have the consciousness and the ability to be authentic and express ourselves in Tiphereth. So it's kind of interesting. What are we separating from this sphere of harmony and completion? One of the symbols of Tiphereth is the equal armed cross, also known as a plus sign. We're going to be taking this and we're going to break off two of its arms and be left with a minus sign. That is how we are separating into Geburah. We are taking the sphere of, effectively, synthesis, and we are breaking it down to be incomplete, right? We are taking the additive properties of Tiphereth and we are removing them so that they are left with the subtractive qualities, or destructive qualities, as they were, because as we know, the Sun and Mars are very destructive in the right capacity, and Mars is the planet of Geburah, the destructive sphere. This is where we are taking the statue, the blank slate, and we are chiseling out all of the parts of it to make the statue revealed underneath. When we go through and we get rid of that complete statue of Tiphereth, we are left only with the destructive removal of Geburah. So how do we get from Geburah to Hesed? Well, it's quite simple, actually. We remove the removal of the statue entirely. We get rid of the removal stage, and we just are left with the blank statue template, or the marble block that we are chiseling the statue out of. We have removed the ability to chisel, so we are left with what? The initial state. This is Hesed. Now, some of you might be wondering, how is Hesed the initial state? I thought Malkuth was the initial state. Well, we are using metaphors to explain this entire situation. But the reason why Hesed is the initial state is because it takes the supernals and it then filters it through and makes it so that it is something that is actually capable of being made. Hesed is the first laws, and it is the idealistic initial state of the world and the initial state of things, right? Before anything is done, before anything has actually happened, Hesed is there in order to give us the ability to conceptualize and to figure out what should the initial state of the chessboard be. And we know this because we have the rules and the ways that those rules should be laid out. And so we're going to put the chess pieces away, and then we're going to figure out how those chess pieces should be laid out by looking at the rules. These rules are Binah. They are the organizing principle from the initial idea of what a chessboard game should even look like. Binah is going to impose some kind of order onto things. Binah is the first sphere that gives things form. Now, there is the rules that is established by Binah. This is why Binah is associated with the planetary power of Saturn. Saturn establishes rules, as does Binah. Now, in Saturn's case, it is establishing rules for basically everything. In Binah's case, it is more the cosmic rules by which the entire everything will be governed. It is the rules document for the entire universe, effectively, before we can even set up the chessboard of Hesed. So what do we separate to get from Binah to Chokmah? Chokmah is the sphere of differentiation. It is the sphere of up and down, respectively. It is also the projective force. So it is the idea that goes into Binah, and then Binah creates the ideas and actually forms the proper, formation of everything that we need. In this instance, using the metaphor of the rules document, Chokmah is just the paper and the page. It is the paper with the symbols on top of it. It is the paper with the letters on top of it. It is the actual words that currently mean nothing. They have not been formed into sentences. They have not been formed into anything. It is just a black ink on a white piece of paper. That differentiation is going to be Chokmah in this case. Chokmah is obviously much more than this. The entirety of the supernals are much more than this. Binah is grossly oversimplified in this video, as is Chokmah. But that's by design, because they are supposed to be, we're simplifying everything into its purest, most simple versions. Now, when it comes to getting to Kether, it is actually bizarrely the easiest to get from Chokmah to Kether. And the reason why is because I kind of already explained this, but there is a yes and a no in Chokmah. There is an up and a down. Chokmah is the first sphere of differentiation. And the interesting thing about that is that Chokmah, what you do to simplify Chokmah into Kether is you remove the and no. So you are just left with yes, right? You are left with the infinite yes of Kether. And this is where Kether gets its unknowability from. Kether is infinite in a way that we cannot mundanely comprehend. Kether is the infinite yes, and Kether cannot be understood by our human minds. This is why when you go ahead and you look at most of the chief deities that people are worshipping, they're not corresponding to Kether. They're corresponding to something lower. The highest gods you usually see actively worshipped are something like in Chokmah. But when you go ahead and you actually look for what the gods of the infinite, the gods that correspond to Kether are, they're much more complicated. It is things relating to all of space and time, all of potential, all of the universe. They are the heads of the head gods. They are actually above them in some ways. You could argue that fate, the three fates, are attributed to Kether, but you would actually be wrong. And the reason for that is because they actually implement order, so they'd be more Binaic in nature. There is only one god that I know of that usually is purely correspondent to Kether, and that is the Aeon of the Steel of Aeon, which is from the PGM. Aeon is said to rule over the three Greek gods, the three head Greek gods, those being Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So if you would like to know more about that, I would actually recommend you look into the Steel of Aeon. That being said, this is how you simplify the entire tree, and this is why when you climb up the tree, people like to make it more complicated, despite the fact that it's actually getting more simple. It's kind of a weird catch-22, because while the seeds of the complexity exist in the beginning, they have to become more complex for the physical world to actually manifest. This is why I like to take this exercise and understand it a little bit, as it removes your mind's tendency to overcomplicate the higher spheres. You can't overcomplicate something if you're, by design, subtracting something from it. So yeah. I have been Dave the Amateur Magus. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you're not having a good day, hope your day gets better. Take it easy, take care, and I will see you next time.